I'd say hormone testing is the topic I am most asked about in my work, probably because it's the thing that you're all most confused about. Not surprising, since there isn't really any definitive information on what to test or when to test when you have period and hormone related problems. This is part of the focus of today's show, and it's why I'm partnered up with Let's Get Checked, an at-home health testing service that takes the guesswork out of this testing stuff. Using Let's Get Checked to test your hormones takes the hassle out of going to your doctor, explaining the tests you need, then going to a lab, and then waiting for results. All you do is order a test kit on letsgetchecked.com, do the test at home according to your menstrual cycle, and ship it back. Within a week, a nurse practitioner will call you to interpret your test results, and the results are uploaded into your account on Let's Get Checked's website, so you have a record of them. Pretty easy. Because I'm talking all about sex hormone testing on the episode today, I suggest starting with the female health test kit, the progesterone test kit, and the testosterone test kit. And you can get a special 35% discount on all test kits until June 30th using the code HORMONES35. But if you happen to listen to this episode after June 30th, you can get 25% off using the code HORMONES25 at letsgetchecked.com. Hi, I'm Nicole Jardim, a certified women's health coach, also known as the Period Fixer, and you are listening to another episode of my podcast, The Period Party, which is what happens when you get the world's leading women's health experts unscripted, uncensored, and on the air. Think of it as girl talk gone menstrual. On The Period Party, we talk candidly about all of those off-limits topics: periods, hormones, vaginas, fertility, miscarriage, postpartum, and so much more. Join me and my guests each episode for fun, fresh, and truthful conversation, and let us help you develop a deeper understanding of how your body works. Hey everyone, this is the last episode of the season and I'm going out with a bang. Yes, that's right. I am doing a solo episode because there's something I absolutely have to share. But before I get into all of that, I just want to let you know that I'm basically taking the summer off and will be back with brand new juicy episodes the first week of September. It's been a long time since I've taken a proper break, since before I started writing Fix Your Period in 2018, which is quite ridiculous when I actually say that out loud. So what I'll be doing this summer is basically nothing. Okay, on to today's episode. So early June, I go and visit with a doctor because I needed to see someone. It had been almost 3 years since my last OBGYN appointment, and I am now living in a new place. I'm no longer in New York City. So I figured that I would go and see a midwife over an OBGYN because I've had luck with midwives in the past. They tend to be more holistic minded, and they are just more open to the things that I am into, which you all know about because obviously you listen to this podcast. And I imagine maybe you follow my work on Instagram or you're on my email list. Anyways, so I chose a midwife based on reviews that I read online. I'm going to talk about how to choose a doctor or find a doctor later on in the podcast episode. But yeah, that's basically what I did because I really don't know a lot of people around this area at all. And I really know no one in this area. So I figured I would just go out on my own. Anyway, like I said, I was just going for a regular kind of annual exam. Haven't been in almost 3 years. And the other reason I decided that I needed to see someone was because a few months ago, I did a hormone test kit from Let's Get Checked. So they do a day 3 test for FSH, LH, estradiol, and prolactin. And I'm going to get more into that in a moment. And my LH and my FH, so that's luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, were high. I was slightly panicked about this because I feel like I'm 41 and they really shouldn't have been high. I have been really stressed for the last few years. So that might have something to do with it. But the point is that they felt higher than they should absolutely have been, especially because when I last tested 2 years ago, they were very much in the normal range. They were actually totally perfect. So I was definitely freaked out. And I wanted to see someone about getting tested again just to make sure that this was correct. Because, again, it's an at-home test and Let's Get Checked has always been accurate for me, but I wanted to just confirm. Anyway, I waited a month to see this doctor, and she actually did appointments at a women's health clinic that was close to me, so I didn't have to drive too far. Bonus. Anyway, the day comes, I get there. My first red flag was the lady who takes your weight and the basic information, last day of your period, what kind of birth control you use, et cetera, et cetera. So she asks me what birth control I'm on, and I just respond casually and say FAM, which stands for the Fertility Awareness Method, which I'm imagining most of you know because, again, you listen to this podcast and you follow me. And she looks at me quizzically and says, "What?" And I said, "The Fertility Awareness Method?" "Wait, what?" And I said, the method where you use your cervical fluid and your basal temperature. And she's like, "Oh, okay." Has never, ever heard of this in her whole life. I'm like, okay, this is a women's health clinic and she has never heard of this birth control method, which is shocking on so many levels to me. Because my last OBGYN, by the way, she actually had worked at an integrative health center in New York City. And that's where I found her over 10 years ago. And then she moved out of the city and was working in upstate New York. And I went and saw her there because why not? Then she closed her practice, but she was fully aware of all of these things and never really questioned it. So to have this happen in the first 5 minutes of being at a doctor's appointment was a little disconcerting. Anyway, I go into the exam room, do the whole thing that we all do, where I make sure that I hide my undies and my bra under my clothes. Why do we do this? I feel like there are multiple memes about this these days. But anyways, yeah, so I sit in the exam table, whatever. The midwife comes in, we exchange greetings, and she sits down and she asks me to tell her why I'm there. So I launch into the fact that I haven't seen a doctor in almost 3 years. I felt like I needed to get an exam, et cetera, et cetera. And she tells me that since I'm 41, the recommendations are now to get a pap smear every 5 years. And since it hasn't even been 3 years yet, I probably shouldn't bother. So yeah, she essentially discourages me from getting one. And I was like, well, I'm already here and I'm not coming back for a while. So let's just do this thing because, of course, I have other things I want to talk about. Anyway, she then says, okay, all good. What else is going on? So I begin to describe doing these day 3 of my cycle tests with Let's Get Checked. And for anyone who's listening, just a little deviation. You're supposed to test FSH, LH, and estradiol on day 3 of your cycle to determine whether your ovaries are working properly or not. If FSH is high on that day, it could indicate that your ovaries are not responding to FSH, meaning that they aren't making enough estradiol to signal to the brain that follicles are being stimulated and the body is moving towards ovulation in a healthy way. If the brain doesn't get that message, it just keeps sending more and more FSH to the ovaries to try and stimulate them so that it can get them to do what they're supposed to do. This could be indicative of diminished ovarian reserve, early menopause, or primary ovarian insufficiency, POI, also known as primary ovarian failure. So yeah, that's kind of a problem, right? Like we want to know these things. And the only way to know really is to be testing FSH and LH and the estradiol on day 3 of your cycle. You can also test AMH, but that's a whole other story. And that's another podcast episode entirely. Anyway, FSH being high or low or LH being high or low all indicate something. And so it's important to know this stuff. Anyway, so back to the doctor's appointment. So I tell her all of this and I can see her starting to purse her lips and her eyes are starting to glaze over a bit. And so I conclude by saying that these results were very unexpected for me because just 2 years ago, my numbers were perfect. Like literally everything was in the optimal range. And I would like to retest these hormones because I just want to make sure that this wasn't a mistake in the test I did. Like I said, Let's Get Checked has always been very reliable, but I just generally want to confirm what is going on. And, if my FSH and LH are high, then I need to kind of figure out what's going on. Why is this happening? So I can see her getting more and more uncomfortable as I continue to describe the tests I'm looking to have done. Mind you, I'm pretty assertive because, hello, I wrote a frigging book called Fix Your Period. So I believe I sound like I know what I'm talking about, generally speaking. Anyway, her reply is, well, I don't really do hormone testing because hormones fluctuate and all. Oh, no joke, you guys. My eyes got wide and I stared at her for a second. And then I said in my head, no shit, lady. Of course, hormones fluctuate, but it doesn't mean you can't get a baseline for your hormones depending on where you are in your cycle. I actually did not say that out loud, said that in my head. Instead, I said, yes, hormones fluctuate, but that doesn't mean you can't test them. They just have to be tested at the right time in the cycle to determine whether they're at the levels they're supposed to be at that particular time in your cycle. So I can already see this is going to be a challenge, but I can do hard things. We can all do hard things, and I'm up for it. I'm also starting to get a glimpse into the lives of the thousands of women who've reached out to me after having one of these experiences where they're literally gaslit by a doctor or medical provider. In fact, it had been a really long time since I'd had an experience like this that I'd almost forgotten what it was like. And I actually needed this to happen in my life to remind me of my purpose on this planet and why I need to continue to fight for women's health rights, because this is not okay on any level. And it really resuscitated that fire in me for sure. Anyway, in response to me saying this, she then says the two things that I really can't believe. By the way, the look on her face is also one of, oh, she's going to try and fight me on this. Well, I better put her in her place. And she says, well, you're 41. An FSH of 19 and an LH of 11 is completely normal because you're in perimenopause. And you know, this can begin at age 35. And there really isn't anything to do about these numbers because you're just at that stage in your life. And then she says, but are you trying to have a baby? Oh my God. At this point, I want to jump off the exam table and literally just walk out the freaking door. Seriously, because there is no way I'm going to spend another 15 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever trying to explain to this woman how all this stuff works when she's supposed to be the trained expert here. So my eyes are still wide. I definitely have an incredulous look on my face. Like, I'm incredulous. And I say to her, no, I'm not trying to have a baby, but consistent, healthy ovulation is extremely important to overall female health, regardless of whether someone is trying to have a baby or not. And for me personally, I want to be ovulating as long as I can and as long as I can make it happen. The fact that something is causing my ovaries not to respond to my brain when they're working just fine, or they were working just fine up until relatively recently, is a huge problem for me. So I'd really like to get these hormones tested on day 3, and then I would like to test progesterone 5 to 7 days post-ovulation. Can we make this happen? So then she says, what about your thyroid? And then she launches into a whole speech about thyroid health and how it can impact your cycle. And I'm nodding my head like, yeah, I know all of this. I know. And I say to her, I'd love to do a full thyroid panel when she finishes her whole spiel, because I really want to cover my bases, because it's been a while since I've tested my thyroid. She, of course, comes back with, well, I only test TSH and T4, and usually the TSH will tell whether there is a problem. So, of course, I'm like, yeah, but a full thyroid panel is going to give you the whole picture. And can I get that instead? She pauses. Then she says, well, your insurance is going to charge you for these tests. You know that, right? And I was like, no, my insurance actually covers this testing as part of my annual exam. And even if it didn't cover it, do I look like I care about whether they charge me or not? I am happy to pay for these tests, as I've made clear, because I'm actively trying to figure out what's going on here. So by this time, her hands are clasped tightly in her lap. Her lips are pursed. The look on her face is one of resignation and the whole like, I've heard all this nonsense before and you're wasting your time, but I'll go with this because what else am I going to do here if you won't back down? So kind of the look of resignation. So she kind of shakes her head slowly and raises her eyebrows and says, well, okay, I will write this up, but I really don't think any of it is necessary because, like I said before, this is a natural part of perimenopause and you're not trying to have a baby. So I do the thing I never think I'll ever be obnoxious enough to do in my whole life. I say, with all due respect, I wrote a 400-page book called Fix Your Period that happens to have over 500 citations in it, a number of which support what I'm saying here today. In other words, I definitely know what I'm talking about, and I'm very clear on what it is I need from you to help me get to the bottom of this. She looks a little taken aback and then says, "Oh, okay. I should get a copy of your book. I would definitely read it." And I said, "I happen to have a copy in the car and I will give it to you afterward." Oh my God, this whole thing was so awkward. Anyways, she does the pap smear. Also, why do these things suck so bad, by the way? Thank God I only have to do them now every 5 years, according to her. So that's great. But seriously, somebody needs to come up with a better way to do these exams. And she does the breast exam and then she does the pelvic exam, by the way, where she tells me that my ovaries are smaller than normal, but that makes sense to her because I'm in perimenopause, as if that should explain everything. And I'm like, first, how on earth can you tell how big my ovaries are from feeling around on my lower abdomen? And second, how could ovaries that are half the size of what they normally should be even be remotely okay at my age? I'm just totally freaking out here as she's saying this so nonchalantly and completely matter-of-factly. Anyway, as a caveat, I had Dr. Jennifer Mercier on the podcast. If you didn't listen to that episode, definitely go back and listen to it if you haven't. So it's Dr. Jennifer Mercier, Mercier. So she's the creator of what's called Mercier therapy, which is basically deep pelvic visceral manipulation. I then went on to see one of her colleagues last year who she trained in this method. And so she's a pelvic PT, and I worked with her for months. And when she does this Mercier therapy on you, it literally feels like you're being punched in the uterus in a good way, I swear. But my point is that she dug deep in there, and this is externally, but she dug in there and she felt my uterus and my ovaries. And she said nothing of the sort, nothing at all. So I just really don't buy this. Maybe I'm completely wrong and I'm happy to be corrected, but I don't buy it. I don't buy how you can just sort of casually feel around on an abdomen and know the size of organs without doing an ultrasound. But I'll talk about that towards the end. So after the breast exam, she says, "Have you had a mammogram? Because you're 41 and you should have had one by now." And I tell her no, there is zero history of breast cancer in my family, and I have no issues with my breast health to my knowledge, so I've not had one as yet. And before anyone listening flips out on me, I suggest everyone do what they feel is right for them. Please don't make decisions about your health based on my experience, because it's my experience, not yours or anyone else's. Our bodies and circumstances are all unique, and as such, we must do what's right for us based on that. So please do what you need to do. And don't do anything based on what I'm saying here. Anyway, she just kept going on and on about the mammogram, and she would not drop it. I just kept thinking the whole time that I wish she would make as big a deal out of my ovarian issues as she was about this mammogram, when clearly that was much more pressing for me personally. And she made sure to fill out a form to have me go and get one immediately. And before we wrapped up, she mentioned the importance of it again and then again before I paid and left the building. If only she knew the importance of consistent ovulatory menstrual cycles, we would have had a very different conversation. Anyways, after the exam and everything, she wants me to explain exactly what hormones I want and on what days, which I think is a good thing. However, I just need to say this again. This midwife seemed unfamiliar with the basics of hormone testing, like what I said earlier about testing FSH, LH, and estradiol on day 3, and then testing progesterone 5 to 7 days post-ovulation. I also wanted estradiol tested around ovulation time to see that it was rising properly. I just also want to say that hormone test ranges exist for each phase of the cycle. When you test estradiol, for instance, the range differs for day 3 or the follicular phase, as well as ovulation and the luteal phase, because hormones fluctuate according to the phase of our cycles, which means there are norms that you can use to determine whether you're in the normal range for that particular stage of where you are in your cycle. So if a doctor ever tells you what the midwife told me, just ask them to explain why there are normal ranges that exist for each phase of the cycle for these hormones. You'll find them on every Google search you do. You can search for normal ranges for whatever hormone and you'll find it. They are on different websites. You'll also find them on test results of pretty much every major lab in the US and other countries. I've probably seen hundreds over the years. So it's really baffling to me why they act like testing hormones is pointless. Who came up with these ranges and why? And why do so many doctors act like they're not applicable to the circumstances that we're all in? It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, I decide there are a few more things I need to say before this appointment is over, of course. So as she's writing down the hormone testing info, I say to her, so if I wanted to have a baby, what would be different about this appointment? What would you be recommending I do? Again, the look. It's kind of like, oh dear, this girl thinks she's going to have a baby naturally in perimenopause. And then she says, I'd recommend egg preservation. So you'd want to get your eggs frozen as soon as possible. Oh, another OMG moment for me, I swear. She didn't ask, when are you thinking about having this baby? So nothing about how to actually support my ovaries or get them working properly, but instead I should go straight to egg freezing, which is an absolutely terrible idea with the test numbers that I have. I mean, in most cases, they won't even let you do IVF with an FSH over 10 or 11. So this suggestion seems totally ridiculous to me. And then the appointment was over. I go out to the front and the same lady who didn't know what FAM was starts saying, well, you have to wait here for the paperwork because I believe you're doing some kind of hormone testing. No joke. She is completely puzzled and totally confused about this request from me. And I said, yes, she's writing things up for me now. Anyway, the midwife then gives the info to this lady and they're going back and forth on this testing, asking me for more clarification about these tests and when I want them. And in the end, I got the test request paperwork and of course, it was completely wrong. But by that point, I was so over it. I ran out to the car, I got my book, I ran back in, I gave it to her. She smiled and thanked me, and whether she read it or not, I'll never know, but I really hope she did because I cannot imagine another woman having to go through what I had just been through. No joke. I left the office and I was in shock for the rest of the day. I think I called everyone I know in the women's health world and told them about my experience, and here I am now telling you. Because this has to stop. Women, you know your bodies. You're smart, you're capable human beings who can get educated about how your menstrual cycle and your fertility works. And you can and should advocate for yourselves. This is a non-negotiable when it comes to your healthcare. So when a doctor dismisses your concerns like this one did to me, or they actually do run labs and tell you you're fine, even when you're clearly stating you don't feel fine, this is what I call medical gaslighting. Not acknowledging what you're telling them, refusing to investigate further without an adequate explanation, or going by the lab numbers alone if they ran tests. The doctor is denying what's real for you and dismissing your experience as if it weren't real. In this case, like I just said, it's time to either advocate for yourself or to find another doctor who's willing to partner with you to figure out what's going on. And when it comes to finding someone who you can trust and who will work with you, I know it can feel challenging. I feel like this is one of the number one complaints I hear about with regard to getting proper health care. So I'd say start by asking people who are like-minded about health and wellness for referrals. So this could be friends or family or people you work out with, anything like that. They may know a doctor or practitioner who you can see. Then head to Google and search for functional medicine or naturopathic or integrative medicine practitioners. There's so many out there now. Read their reviews, call their office, and ask questions about what it's like to be a patient. Maybe look into midwives. I know I did not have the best of luck with this one, but I definitely did with previous ones. And there are lots of them who do well woman care, and they take a more holistic approach. So that's certainly an option too. And if you're trying to just get some hormones tested, first you want to get my hormone testing cheat sheet. So this is a 15-page invaluable guide that makes hormone testing simple. And so in it, I explain why you should test your hormones, what tests you should do to understand your unique baseline, how to test and when in your cycle to test, normal test ranges versus the functional or optimal lab ranges. This is an important one, as well as what your test results mean and can tell you about your health, what to do next after getting your hormones tested, and a printable tear sheet to give to your doctor with the tests that you want. So you're going to find that on NicoleJardim.com/programs. It's just $27 for an absolute wealth of information. So you can be super prepared for your next doctor's visit and then be able to have an understanding of what your test results might mean, as well as what to do after you get your hormones tested. Also, finally, don't forget that I'm partnered with Let's Get Checked, which is an innovative at-home testing company. You order your test kits online, you get them delivered to your home, and test when it's convenient for you. And then Let's Get Checked. It's so simple. It just uses a finger prick. You fill a very small vial, and then you drop your test kit in the mail, and they'll have results in about 3 to 5 business days. So a nurse will call you with your results, and the results will also be available in your online portal. And then you just compare the results to what's in the testing cheat sheet to get an idea of what might be going on. Again, this is not diagnosis. You're just trying to sort of piece together what might be happening for you. And then you see a doctor and you take it from there. So at-home testing for me personally is the preferred way to do things, as is evidenced by the fact that I could barely get a doctor/midwife to get the testing that I needed to get her to do. But it means you don't have to make a doctor's appointment or go to the doctor or go to the lab for testing or draw huge amounts of blood and then wait ages for your test results. So I feel like it's kind of a win-win. And plus, till the end of June, all test kits are 35% off with code HORMONES35. But if you happen to listen to this episode after June 30th, you can get 25% off all test kits with code HORMONES25. And that's letsgetchecked.com. And then you can input either of those codes depending on when you listen. Okay, finally, for those of you who are wondering why my test results were not great and what I've been doing, I'm pretty sure a big part of it was the immense stress of the last 2 years. I've alluded to it on Hair and on social media and in my emails, but writing a book and putting it out into the world did me in. I've been through hard times in my life, but nothing prepared me for this experience. We also moved in the midst of me finishing up the manuscript, which was a really bad idea. And we put our stuff in storage and we were staying with family and then we were traveling and we planned to come back to New York City in March of 2020. Well, the pandemic had different plans for us. So we were actually nomads roaming around the United States for many, many more months than we'd anticipated. In fact, we were on the West Coast when COVID happened and we ended up in Vegas visiting my sister and then Sedona. And then we drove across the country through Texas, stopping to visit friends there, and then through the South, and then through Atlanta and Virginia, and then back to the East Coast. It was kind of crazy. So it was fun in many ways, but utterly exhausting on a deep, deep level. And we finally were able to buy a house in November of 2020 and things began settling down. But I feel like I'm only now emerging from the burnout that I've been in for what has felt like a year, maybe longer. Plus, my diet was not the greatest when we were traveling across the country and, and just all over the place. So that I think also played a role in this. Obviously, it's what I talk about. So in case you're ever wondering about stress and its impact on the health of your ovarian function, I'm a living example of it. And I know that I do this work for a living. So I feel like it's important to be completely transparent about what has happened in my life and what my test results were like so that others can know that, yeah, we're all human. This happens. So yeah, take things off your plate. Ask for help. Go out and get the help you need. Manage your stress. Eat as well as you can. Manage your blood sugar. Support your gut and liver function. Take care of your thyroid. Exercise. Sweat. All of this can and does affect your ovaries. In my book, Fix Your Period, which I've talked about multiple times now, I outline almost the exact protocol that I've used for years on my clients and I'm currently using on myself with some additions like increased antioxidants and ovarian function support, liver support, red light therapy over my abdomen, extra sleep, all of these things. Anyways, I really think you've got this if this is something you might be struggling with. And I really appreciate you listening to my story. I hope it's been helpful in some way for you. I'd love it if you shared this episode with anyone in your life who you think will benefit from listening to it. And don't forget, the Let's Get Checked tests are always an option if you are trying to get your hormones tested. There's also my hormone testing cheat sheet, which will guide you about what tests to get. I outline all the tests from Let's Get Checked in there, as well as all the tests if you were just going to your doctor. So regardless, it'll be invaluable to you. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you have the most incredible summer, and I will see you here again in September. That's a wrap. Be sure to join me for more Girl Talk Gone Menstrual in upcoming episodes, and let me and my guests help you to get to know your period and your body better. In the meantime, if your hormones are screaming for more, check out my previous period party episodes. And of course, if you love what you hear, please take a moment to rate the podcast. And if you're looking for an even deeper dive into your hormone and period problems, go ahead and grab my book, Fix Your Period, by going to fixyourperiod.com.